He's a senior creative with 18 years of experience who specializes in leading the design process for startups who care about having unified brand experiences between their marketing communication and the products they offer. He's an expert in strategizing with CEOs and leading the design process for customer centric brands that want to visually communicate their value and convert strangers into customers by creating amazing logos, evergreen websites, captivating marketing funnels, printed and online collaterals, and so much more. When it comes to product development, he's highly experienced working with CTOs and product leaders to produce intuitive user experience based wireframes and clean UI designs for development teams to produce stellar products by providing detailed instructions and clear creative direction for developers to follow and execute. Sounds interesting, isn't it? Let's chat with Tasso Nikitakis in today's episode and understand about his creative journey and his entrepreneurial journey so far, how he has been helping brands scale up, not only scale up, but also acquire some good funding, and not only acquire good funding, but also get acquired by some big brands. This is the Guiding Voice podcast series, the Guiding Voice for a Better Future. Friends, I'm your host, Navin Samala, just a fellow professional on a mission to make the world a better place to live. Through the Guiding Voice, we drive conversations that matter, conversations that add value to your life and to your career. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm super excited to welcome Tasso to the Guiding Voice platform. And Tasso, thank you so much for joining me. And I love your background. I love your jacket. In fact, so nice to see you. Hearty welcome to the Guiding Voice.
Thank you for having me.
So, Tasso, I'm on a new initiative at the Guiding Voice at this point in time. And I want to interview as many nationals as possible so that our audience get diverse perspective about entrepreneurship, about leadership, about technology, about branding, self-help, personality development, all the topics that we used to cover. So far, I have interviewed people from 30 different countries, but I wanted to touch as many countries as possible. And I found your profile very interesting, and we had a little bit of interaction before getting into this recording. So I would request you to share your background with our audience. Okay, which country are you from, and where are you living currently? Anything?
So I have a somewhat of a unique journey in that I've lived in 3 different countries for my life. I lived in Canada on and off for 13 years, California for 10 years, and now Greece for 18 years. So if you're doing the math, that makes me a little over 40. And I moved to Greece about 8 years ago to be able to work remotely with the US and Canada. The time difference really works for me. So I like being here. Plus, the cost of living is so much better. I was able to reduce my my burn rate while living in a developing country. So that's why I'm in Greece, although most of my clients are in the US and Canada.
Oh, wonderful. And you are the first guest I'm hosting who is based out of Greece, and you'll be remembered for that reason also.
I'm happy to be the first.
Yeah. And Tasso, can you briefly share the top 3 things that I've attributed to your success so far? Like I've gone through your profile. It's so impressive and inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Like I said, I've had a somewhat of a unique journey. So the top 3 things may be hard for me to keep it to 3 because I've been very lucky and fortunate in a lot of ways. One of the things that has contributed to my success is something my mother told me when I was younger. She said to me, I don't care whether or not you are a doctor or a garbage man. All I care is that you're the best at what you do. And so my mom is a perfectionist, if that's not clear. Uh, and so I took that to heart, and she said, it's much more important that you love what you do
Mhm.
and you make a lot of money at it. Because if you love what you do, you're going to put in the energy that it requires in order to put in those extra hours that you normally
Mhm.
wouldn't do if you hated it. So that would be the first thing, is the advice from my mother, to do something I love, to be the best at what I do. That'd be the first one. The one of the other top reasons I think I have been successful is I have learned to be patient with the process, to communicate with
Mm.
people often. Quite often, I like to think that everybody believes they're a good person, and
Yeah.
everybody believes that their actions are justified.
Mm.
So often, it's my job as a leader in marketing and creative to hear what they're trying to say. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this later, the difference between their vision versus their strategy, because
Mhm.
often we don't agree on strategy, and it's easy to lose
Mm.
patience with people who we don't agree with on strategy. But I think if you listen a little bit deeper and you're more patient
Yeah.
with people, you're able to hear the vision that they have, and then you can offer an alternative strategy that they haven't thought of, because that's not their profession. And I would say a third, one of the top other three things that, let me just backtrack and say that again. One of the final top three things that I would say I have attributed to my success is being able to schedule my time the way that I see fit.
Mm.
Um, I'm an independent worker. I've been a freelancer for most of my career. Of the 18 years, I would say the 16 years have been working remotely from home. It kind of happened that way. It wasn't how I anticipated my career going, but things happened in my life in such a way that I had to work outside of the office.
Mhm.
Maybe I'll get into that a little bit later. But the long story is that just from necessity, I learned to be autonomous. And
Mm.
that has, now being slightly older than 40, I'm seeing how I have a lot of colleagues who have spent the last 10, 15 years in an office, and they're
Yeah.
miserable. And I, I, I happen to believe that people would be more productive working from home than from the office. So
Mm.
I think my ability to work autonomously has been
Mm.
a huge benefit to my career. So,
Awesome.
so those are my top three.
Yeah. So patience and loving what you do and autonomy, just to summarize.
Mhm.
Fabulous. Let's now jump to my favorite topic, which is about the toughest lessons learned in your entrepreneurial journey.
Mhm.
Are there any things which you did not anticipate before embarking as an entrepreneur? And you might have come across some hindrances which might have taught you a lot of great things, which over a period of time we appreciate. Had that not happened, I would have not learned so and so, right?
Mhm.
Has there been any of those things which you want to share?
Yeah, there's been a lot of lessons. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you don't do what anybody does what they do for almost 20 years, and they don't have some lessons. I would say for me, one of the lessons that I learned is that, like I said earlier, because a lot of people don't have patience in
Yeah.
communication, and so what happens is it's easy to fall into a situation with a customer or a client where
Mm.
the customer or the client is not communicating directly.
Yeah.
They may be afraid of hurting your feelings. They may be afraid of admitting something. They may want to maintain control. Whatever the reason is, rarely will you have a client or a customer who is direct and tells you the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
So, one of the toughest lessons I've had to learn is to really dig deep and to keep asking the question, to find a way to ask the question in a different way that makes the people who are listening and and communicating with you, for them to feel like they're not being attacked. And that's very
Mm-hmm.
challenging, because a feeling of being attacked is personal. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with the person who's listening to the question. But still, learning how to communicate in a way that's nonviolent, there's a whole communication strategy that we can go into of nonviolent communication a little bit later. But in general, learning to just dig deep was one of the biggest lessons I had to learn. And then if you're not digging deep, then you'll end up having arguments because you're not agreeing on strategy, like I was saying earlier. And that's where I would say one of the next most important lessons I learned was to write everything down to get your clients to buy in to to agree to everything before you move to the next step. Because if you don't do that, and if you don't lead the client in that way, then you end up allowing the client to take over because they don't feel safe in the way that you're directing them. So, so what I learned was to communicate the roadmap from the beginning, get them to buy in, get them to agree to certain rules. For instance, if we're going to work together, if you're not on time, communicate, right? That's something that I think is respectful. And like we said earlier, before this call, we were both late and we both communicated, right?
Yeah.
And that's a sign of respect for the other person. And often when you're working with leaders, they don't have a lot of patience. So, and there's an issue of there's a trigger of feeling of lack of respect if people don't treat you in a way that you want to be treated. So I've learned to be extra sensitive to leaders' needs because as one myself, we have a lot of things, a lot of responsibilities. Often we're stressed. We may not have the patience. And so if I can offer that patience on my end and I can communicate and I can align, instead of aligning strategy, if I can align vision, then when the time comes for us to discuss strategy, they're going to be more aligned because you agree on the final destination.
Yeah.
But how you get there, they may want to zigzag up the mountain, but you want to go straight up. And then you just have to get your client to see why that's important so they can buy in so you can then them. Otherwise, if you just try to lead them, you're going to have resistance from somebody who's extremely stubborn. I would say most CEOs are stubborn people, lack patience, have the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they're trying to do everything all by themselves because often leaders, I would say, from what I've done, they find it difficult to delegate things. So just understanding where they're coming from, communicate vision instead of strategy first. And then another lesson that I learned is even though you may know something, you still can't skip the steps. So, for instance, when it comes to developing a brand, first you have to make sure that your product is good before you start investing in marketing, right? Or in a logo. Often people, when in the beginning of my career, I started as a logo designer, and people would come to me and say, "Hey, I want a logo." And to be honest, I was looking for money. I had to find a way to pay the bills. I wasn't about to question my customer whether or not it was the right time for them to have a logo. I just did the logo. And so what I would do is I would create the logo for them without validating their product, without making sure that there was a product market fit. I would do the logo, and then they would go to market with an amazing logo. If I do say so myself, I mean, this will sound egotistical, but I'm one of the best designers in the world. And if I give somebody a logo that makes them look level A, but their product is level C, then what's going to happen is they're going to launch. People are going to have this immediate first impression that this is a professional company that is serious and has figured out its offer and all that stuff. And then by the time they use your product and have experience with your brand, by the end of that experience, they're like, you know what? You sold me, you did a bait and switch. You sold me professionalism, but you gave me level C. And what that will do is that will hurt my customer in the long run, right? Yeah. Because what you've done is you've come to market as an imposter. And so it's like going to get a really nice bottle of wine, to give you an example. You go to the bar, or not the bar, but the wherever you buy wine from in India. I don't know. You're in India, right? I don't know what it's like in India, but in the US, you go
I'm
to,
in India.
but you just sort of go pick up a bottle of wine from all the bottles of wine, right? And so
Yeah.
what are you doing? You're looking at the label, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. Nine out of 10 purchases when it comes to wine has to do more with the label than any
Right.
connoisseurship of the wine. So
Right.
you buy the wine, it looks beautiful. You put it in a glass, and it tastes like garbage. What are you going to do? Are you going to buy that again? No. In fact, they could improve the formula of their wine. Let's say you still wouldn't drink it. And not only that, but you would also go tell all your friends, you know, that really nice wine that is got the beautiful label, don't buy it. It's false. It's an imposter. Don't buy it. And you're actually going to actively engage in sabotaging the brand.
Correct.
So that's all that coming back to, you don't want to skip steps. You have to make sure that you do every step, even though you believe that there's a product market fit, even though believe your offer is solid, you have to validate that offer before you go to the next step. So I would say, in the interest of time, I won't continue, but I could go on and on.
No, I like that wine example. Normally, if customer likes a product, they might tell to 10 other people. But if customer dislikes the product, they go to social media and they tell to all their followers. Right. So which means if you are giving a negative experience, it damages the reputation, and it is going to impact the future customers.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you are enhancing the customer experience, they will be loyal. They'll bring in more customers. Yeah, very important points. Now let's talk about your venture, Pigeonking. So what is the reason for naming it as Pigeonking?
So Pigeonking is a venture that I started in 2010 with a former business colleague of mine. Actually, we're working together on a new venture, but I won't be talking about that today. But we started it in 2010 in San Diego. At the time, I had 5 or 6 years of experience as a designer. I had already achieved some moderate success. And so we decided to come together and develop a brand development agency. And of course, being a brand developer, I had to come up with a name. So why Pigeonking? So pigeons were one of the very first technologies that we used to communicate over great distances. And you're the carrier pigeon, right? You put a little note on the pigeon, you make it fly off and go find somebody, carry the message. And then, so this was the first form of telecommunication that we had. Other than, smoke signals, if you're, a Native American. As one of the first technologies of communicating a message, being that marketing is all about communicating a message, it seemed the pigeon as a mascot made a lot of sense. And then king, because I want to be the premier source of truth. So the king is the one who dictates the message to everybody who works for the king. And so because I want to help CEOs who are the king of their operation, essentially a pigeon king is a CEO, is the person who has to guard the brand and make sure that everybody who works for that brand is aligned with that vision. That's one of the key roles of a CEO. And so that's what pigeon king.
Yeah, I love the logic. It's so good. I think it's relatable, wonderful. And Tasso, you have helped brands and helped them in terms of raising capital for over 300 startups in the last 2 decades. So I'm really curious to understand from you, how do you approach this brand building for companies? What is a framework or series of steps or series of activities that you follow?
Like I said earlier, I don't like to skip steps. So the methodology that I've developed is based on a pretty standard model of discover, strategize, and execute. Meaning that first I have to, so typically what the people who come to me are either in one of 2 categories. They're either a startup where they have no experience, they have no brand, they have nothing, or excuse me, or they have a business that is making them a fair amount of money, but it's not yielding a profit because they haven't niched down to scale, right? So typically those are usually because everybody again comes to me for a logo. In their mind, what they think is I need a logo, I need a website, I need to promote my message, I need to be taken seriously. But often they've skipped steps. So in either case, I see where they are. If they're at the beginning of their journey, I would take them on as a client to discover their expertise, the market. We would maybe come up with an offer and validate it against potential customers that they would want to interview. So a big portion of validating the offer is surveys, interviews, and focus groups. Because usually your customers can tell you more about the competition than you can research. They've already done all the research for you. And I really like to believe, I really like to work smart, not hard. So I would rather 10 people who've done the research that I couldn't do in a year versus try and hire people to do the research. So I go straight to the customer, and I'll have them fill out some kind of survey giving me demographics, psychographics, reasons why they're purchasing, such as, is the reason you want to hire me to do it for you because you don't want to do it, you don't know how to do it? Is it that you don't have time to do it, or doing it would make you lose money? So learning what the reason is, understanding what their motivations is. Are they trying to save as much money as possible right now? Are they looking for a good value? Or are they looking for performance where money is no object because they're losing money by this not working? So there's just a lot of questions that you need to do during discovery. And I would say the thing that separates me from a lot of other people in my business is they often spend more time in development than they spend in discovery. And I would say I spend about 80% of my time asking questions. This comes from Einstein. Einstein says if you understand, he said, if I was looking to solve a problem, I would spend 99% understanding the problem and 1% of the time fixing it. So I spend a lot of time in discovery. It's the foundation of my pyramid. And then once we do the discovery, then when it comes to strategy, the second phase, you already have a lot of buy-in from your customer, from your client. You're the CEO because you've taken them on this journey with you of discovering. So if I go back to the CEO and I say, hey, here's 200 surveys, and the majority of the people in the survey are women. Do you think that maybe women are your primary target? Because only women respond. And they may say yes or no. But you can start aligning your demographics first, which is the easiest because it's a non-emotional conversation. Another issue I see often is businesses saying, "Oh, we serve 20-year-olds to 50-year-olds, men and women, just blanket," and that's a first sign of somebody who has not thought of strategy clearly. So if you've already done the discovery, you prevent strategies like that from developing, because then you say, well, look at this, 90% of the people who answered were women, and 70% of those people are millennials. So maybe we should speak to millennial women. Then the moment you get a buy-in, boom, that's locked. It's written down. It's not changing. If I ever have a conversation again about that, I'll say, hold on. We made the decision. We found out what we found in discovery. Now we're in strategy, and you've told me yes to this target. We're building everything based on that target. So if we go to the next step and you change your mind, all the work that we're going to do from here to then is for nothing. So you have to make sure we're not changing. Are you sure? And so by making them buy into the discovery and then to the strategy, when the time comes for execution, the final phase, it's clockwork. It's just, I don't spend any time. Like I would say, again, by my standards, some of the best websites visually and as far as communication, about its message. I think I make some of the best in the world. And it's because I spent all the time up in discovery and strategy. Execution, while that was how I started off in execution. I learned so much that I've learned as much as I have in my career, that I've learned that execution should be where you spend the least amount of time and you spend the least amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those are my
Yeah.
3 phases.
Great. So discovery, where you spend a lot of time, and then strategy, where you are trying to dive little deep in terms of performing further study and how to align it with various demographics of the customers and so on.
Mhm.
And finally, the execution part, wherein you spend least amount of time, because you have spent a lot of time doing the groundwork, and in terms of spending good amount of time during the first 2 phases, discovery and strategy. Yeah,
Yeah.
very well articulated. And yeah, I think it makes absolute sense, especially for the kind of field that you are in. I think it is relevant. And as you quoted about Einstein's quotation, like, I spend 99% of the time understanding the problem. I think that is true. I heard one more quote related to the problem solving. What it says is, if you have understood the problem, half of it is already solved. Like,
Mhm.
many times people overlook the problem. They try
Mhm.
to jump into the solution right away rather than diving deep into the problem and to understand it better. Awesome. And I've gone through the case study of Hubdoc, okay,
Mhm.
which was acquired by Xero for $70 million, right? So,
Yes.
which is not a small deal at all.
No.
And how did you help Hubdoc? Do you want to share your story of Hubdoc with our audience?
Yeah. So let me give you a little bit of background on what Hubdoc,
Hmm.
what happened with Hubdoc for
Yeah.
your listeners who may not have read the case study. Um, so Hubdoc approached my employer because I
Hmm.
actually wasn't, I didn't even know Hubdoc existed. But one day I just showed up to
Hmm.
Hubdoc because my employer said to me, you're going to be working from this address tomorrow.
Hmm.
And so I just showed
Okay.
up thinking I was working for my employer, and turned out that I had been subcontracted because my employer wanted to save some money, and they only wanted me 3 days out of the week. So they farmed me
Hmm.
out for 2 days out of the week to one of their friends who was just down the street. In a similar, both were fintech corporations, so it was very similar. And so I just sort of showed up at this office, not knowing what I was there for, and then
Hmm.
I was told that I was going to help them with, rebrand and pivot. So I naturally, like I said, I just went right into discovery. I spent about 2 months in discovery for a 3-month project.
Hmm.
The project was to help them. The first project was to help them with their intro video. So what I had to do was I had to create a brand story that would communicate to our customers, or to their customers, that we understood their problems, that we had a solution, and what the benefits of that solution were, and how it was going to change their life, how it was going to transform their life. Um, so early on, we decided it was very clear to us that we wanted to have 2 different targets. There was a B2B target and a B2C target.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
the values of the company were to be friendly, to be approachable, to be easy to use, to be global. So and they already had a style. They came to me with
Hmm.
they they had tried to mimic FreshBooks, which was another Canadian company based out of Toronto.
Yeah.
Also, like them, was in the accounting world. So I started to take their values and develop a story based around that. And so in psychology, we call this the drama triangle. And in fact, you'll see this in
Hmm.
every Disney movie you've ever seen. You've seen the drama triangle. The drama triangle was developed by a psychologist by the name of Karpman. So sometimes it's called the Karpman triangle. It's spelled Karp, Harp, Mann, I believe, 2 N's.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and if you look in what Karpman discovered in this drama triangle, it's that everybody in this triangle, the victim, the villain, and the ally.
Hmm.
Well, he calls them persecutor, victim, and villain. No, persecutor, victim. I'm forgetting his, but it's the general idea that you have. Look at the Little Mermaid. You
Yeah.
have Ursula, she's the villain. You have
Mm-hmm.
Ariel, she's the victim,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the ally,
Mm.
who is the ally? Some kind of fairy godmother. Well, she's got her. Who's the one who calls her to action? It's funny because Ursula appears to be her ally, but turns out not to be her ally, and that's maybe something unique about Little Mermaid. But usually, let's go to Lord of the Rings. It's a better example.
Okay.
Frodo is the victim because you've got the Shire and it's about to be attacked by the villain, Sauron. And you have ally, which is Gandalf. And Gandalf comes to the hero or the victim at the beginning of the journey, but who becomes a hero? Gandalf
Yeah.
comes to the victim
Mm.
and says, I have the solution and I'm going to call you to action, which is a very Joseph Campbell idea.
Mm-hmm.
The mentor is going to call you to action to go through the hero's journey, to go fight the dragon, to get the to say you see how that goes. So that triangle exists because everybody in that triangle gains some kind of benefit. It's an identity. So once you understand that every story has these three identities, then
Yeah.
and you build that into a brand story, then you can start communicating like I needed to communicate for Hubdoc, the
Mm.
villain, the victim, and the hero in the story, so that
Mm.
people could watch that, see themselves as the victim, and see that the ally, the company, was going to help them through their problem. So in the case of Hubdoc, the villain is the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is
Mm.
tax season, right? Because the
Yeah.
IRS is asking you for money during tax season. And
Mm.
another problem is the disorganization that most business owners have with their product, with their accounting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the solution is Hubdoc. And what does Hubdoc do?
Mm-hmm.
Hubdoc is represented by a robot that goes and automatically fetches your documents from the bank and sends them
Okay.
from your bank to your accountant directly. So when tax season comes, you don't have to go looking for receipts. Your accountant already has them, and so
Mm.
that value add was what we went to market with. I built them the intro video, and you can watch it. Hubdoc still has it up after now 8 years since we've worked together. Um, and I would say communicating that story was the first step to Hubdoc's value being understood by customers. Which and it all also added a level of professionalism because the graphics themselves were professionally created.
Mm-hmm.
I hired an animator. I hired an artist. Even though I can do those things, I wanted to focus on people who were better than me.
Yeah.
And so I led a very small team and then combined that with a very solid teamwork from the marketing department because I was not
Mm-hmm.
the head of marketing. I was working with the head of marketing as their head of creative to develop
Okay.
all of this. And we had really good communication too. So I would say combination of my methodology of using brand story and the Cartman drama triangle, taking that along with a very solid team effort from everyone because the product was amazing, the marketing messaging was amazing, and support was amazing too. They Hubdoc by the time I left after 4 years, we were a company of 4 or 6 people, and we were up to like 120 people.
Mm. Wow.
And so then Hubdoc kept winning awards by
Mm-hmm.
Xero, and we did a huge effort to use Xero in our marketing because Xero and QuickBooks were the two premier accounting
Mm-hmm.
platforms at the time. So
Mm.
also that relationship with them uh, turned out so that after 2-3 years, Xero made an offer to buy the
Yeah.
company and bring the brand underneath their umbrella.
Yeah. Wow. That's so compelling story. So
Mm.
you have very well explained the three characters over here: villain, victim, and hero. And
Mhm.
now I'll do a bit of research on this Cupman. It's a drama triangle. I think it's a great learning. So thanks for sharing that. And with that, let's move forward, Tasso.
Mhm.
What is the most challenging assignment that you have worked so far?
Um, I would say instead of saying what the most challenging assignment was, I would say the most challenging
Hmm.
issue I have found working with
Okay.
clients, because
Okay.
one, I don't want to isolate anybody
Hmm.
and talk about them. So I would say the most challenging thing that I have had to deal with was how much how much slack to give CEOs when working with them.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
because CEOs, like I said, they're stubborn people. We are stubborn people. Um, I have to include myself in there.
Yeah.
We like to get our own way. We're
Yeah.
independent, and so when we ask for help, I think it's hard for a CEO to ask for help. I think a lot
Hmm.
of our identity is tied into performance, and when
Hmm.
we can't perform on our own, there's somewhat we take a little bit of a hit to our ego, just in general. Some people more than others. It's not, but I think to some degree there's a little bit of that. So when working with clients, if you're not leading them enough,
Hmm.
they'll take over, and they'll
Yeah.
take over because they don't feel safe. And safety is a primary concern of a CEO, especially if they have a large team. So
Hmm.
something I had to learn. One of my biggest challenges was where to draw the line between giving too much slack and not giving enough slack, because I don't want to appear like you know uh, 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 a fascist leader, like you're
Yeah.
going to do it my way. That's not going to work, and it's
Hmm.
also not going to work if I'm the complete opposite and I say,
Yeah.
well, let's do whatever you want to do, sir. Like that's not going to work for a CEO either. So there has to be somewhere in
Yeah.
between fascist and pushover. Somewhere in the middle is the golden ratio. So for me, it was very challenging to find that. And I believe that I found the answer by what I was saying to you earlier about getting buy in. So, in order to lead your client needs to know that you have everything under control, but they also need to feel like you're calm. Because if you're at
Hmm.
the moment stressed, that's gonna trigger their. So the only way to maintain calm is to follow a methodology. To be proactive about doing everything in the right order. So that's how I solved that problem, where
Okay.
I would introduce my client to the roadmap. I would get their buy-in, and they would understand what requirements I had of them if we were going to work together. I understood what requirements they had of me for us to work together, and then I communicated vision, not strategy, and,
Okay.
and and
Hmm.
that and that allowed me to lead customers.
Hmm. Awesome. So I think this has been insightful conversation. Yeah, so let's add some spice to the episode. I'm going to kick off a quick rapid fire round with some
Mhm.
interesting questions with your consent. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, I love this spirit. And here comes my first question. And I'm really curious about because this is to a branding guru, creative person, Mr. Tasso.
Mhm.
If you could have one gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say?
A billboard with anything. So I'm assuming the purpose of the billboard is to attract people to my business.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. So if I
Hmm.
want to attract people to my business, I want to communicate that I understand the hell that they're going through.
Hmm.
And I think one of the biggest struggles now, it depends who I'm speaking to. If am I speaking to startups or am I speaking to
Hmm.
people who need to pivot?
Hmm.
If I'm speaking to startups, I would say something along the lines of I would make it clear to them that they are suffering from a very big problem. And the problem that they're suffering from is usually new business idea syndrome.
Hmm.
So I would maybe ask the question, do you suffer from new business idea syndrome?
Hmm.
And I'm hoping that would create enough of an interest to say, wait, what is that exactly? And they would look, but maybe that wouldn't be a very positive, or not positive, but a very impactful message, because the message also has to go dive directly to the problem that they have. So maybe it would be something more direct. Maybe
Hmm.
are your employees wasting your time? something to that, because that's really what a CEO is dealing with, right? You have a
Yeah.
team that is operating in silos. There's no
Mm-hmm.
communication or strategy. Everybody's doing whatever they want to do, and you have no control over your team.
Yeah.
Yeah, something to that effect. Is your team controlling you? Something to that.
Is okay. Is your team controlling you?
Yeah.
Nice. Next, which company, in your opinion, is good at brand storytelling?
Hubdoc.
Okay.
No, but seriously, I think it's interesting because who does a good job of brand storytelling? Who does a good job? Who does a good job? Like with Hubdoc, I hit people over the head with it. It was very clear that I was doing that. But I think if you look at there are a few examples. Coca-Cola does a good job. So
Okay.
Coca-Cola is selling you a vision. What does the vision look like? If you look at all the people in Coca-Cola ads, they're all drinking Coke and they're having a wonderful time. It doesn't matter if it's cold. It doesn't matter if it's hot. If it's cold, they're snuggling, and if they're hot, then they're enjoying the summer. Right? Okay. And so who's the victim? The victim is the user, right? The person who's drinking Coca-Cola who wants to feel good. Coca-Cola is the answer to feeling good. So who's the villain? The environment is the villain, right? And so you're like, oh, well, how is that so? I say, well, if it's really cold, you could die from hypothermia. If it's really hot, you can die from heat exhaustion. But Coca-Cola makes it just wonderful, and just by drinking Coca-Cola, happiness. Enjoy Coca-Cola, I think, is their motto. So, or just enjoy. So they do a really good job, I think, of communicating, of sub-communicating, because they don't actively tell you that, are you cold? They're not going to have that conversation. They're just going to show you that story, and then show you a koala bear, or not a koala bear, a polar bear, with the babies and drinking Coke, playing in the snow, right? And being you can't do that with humans. You can't put humans in the snow and like, oh, this is wonderful. No, they're freezing. So you just instead of changing the villain, they changed their victim. And instead of making a victim, which would be a human, they made it a polar bear, which is a hero in the snow. So just some examples of storytelling. But there's Apple, there's Tesla. I mean, they all do a very good job.
Yeah, good, fair enough. And let's move ahead to the next question. Can you describe yourself in just one word?
Verbose. Do you know the word verbose?
Yes.
I talk a lot.
Yeah. And what is the weirdest thing that you have ever eaten?
Menudo. Have you ever heard of menudo?
No, I didn't.
Menudo is a Mexican dish. I believe it's Mexican. Where they take the stomach lining and they turn it into a soup. And I have a weird thing about texture where, like I'll eat tomato sauce, but I won't eat tomatoes because tomatoes are slimy, but tomato sauce. So I have a weird thing about texture. And when it comes to menudo, you're tasting the inside of the stomach and you're tasting all these little squiggly things that are there to suck the nutrients.
Yeah, intestines.
It was the most disgusting thing I've ever eaten. But if I can say the one thing that I've eaten that I didn't think I was going to like, but I liked, was tongue. I went and I had cow tongue at a Korean barbecue. Both dishes were given to me by a friend of mine who is a chef. So I trusted her. And she. I don't know if I still trust her.
Yeah, I ate the goat version because we don't eat cow in India, but the goat version of menudo and also the tongue, and it tastes good. So I can relate to it. Okay, moving to the next one. Between invisibility versus super strength, which one do you prefer, given a chance?
I think obviously as a man, as I consider myself as a protector, so I'd like to have super strength, but I think that if I thought a little bit more about it, I would probably say invisibility, because
Hmm.
as I mentioned to you, I like to do a lot of discovery. I'm very thorough in discovery, and
Hmm.
invisibility would give me a chance to discover things that I normally wouldn't be able to discover if I was there. The same way how if you have the double slit experiment in physics, how an observer makes it into particles instead of a wave, or vice versa. I don't remember the experiment, but the same thing is an observer changes the response of the universe. And if I can be observing without being observed, I think I would learn more.
Hmm. All right, yeah, makes sense. And with that, let's move to the last one out of rapid fire. What is one electronic gadget that you would like to see or invent yourself?
A teleportation device. I hate traveling, but I love the destination.
Hate travel but love the destination. Good one. And I think that should be the tagline for whoever is building the teleportation device. They
Mhm.
have to put that hate travel, love the destination as a gigantic billboard. I
I
love
guess
it.
I guess I'm
Yeah.
concerned. I'm concerned about using it though, because
Oh.
just on a philosophical level, are you the same person on the other end? Like because essentially the teleportation
Yeah.
device would deconstruct you and then reconstruct you on the other end.
Right.
Are you the same
Right.
person, or are you a different person? Have you
Mm.
just died after you go through?
Mm.
So that I would
Mm.
still feel very careful about going through it.
Mm.
But
Mm.
assuming I don't die after using the teleportation device, yeah, I'd like that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, good one. I loved it. And let's flip back to the mainstream. And here comes my next question. What is your one piece of advice to those aspiring entrepreneurs to make big in their careers?
Follow my advice, or sorry, not my advice. Follow my mom's advice. Um, do what you love.
Mm.
I'll give you an example. My girlfriend,
Mm.
she's a very intelligent girl. She has
Mm.
a couple of degrees. To give you an idea, I don't have a single degree. I don't have a high school degree. I don't have a college degree. I left
Mm.
school before I got a degree, but she has two.
Mm. Mm.
And yet I'm much further along in my career because I did the things that I loved, and
Mm.
did the things that she had to do to maybe make her family happy. Maybe she has her own reasons of why she did what she did, but I followed my heart. I did what I love,
Mm.
and thankfully, I'm in a position where I can offer her the space that she needs to develop her career. But
Yeah.
if career is important to you, don't chase money, chase
Mm.
chase love.
Wow. So unique and so profound. And with that, here comes the last one. Just can you share your experience being hosted on the Guiding Voice platform? How did you feel? How was your experience overall?
I've enjoyed it. I just met you. I had never heard of your podcast before this, um,
Yeah.
but I really appreciate being given a platform to share my knowledge. I think
Hmm.
one of the saddest things is that one day I'm going to die, and all of this knowledge that I have is going to die with me. Uh,
Right.
I'd like to know that future generations are able to take the things that we've learned and
Yeah.
improve upon them. So for me, being hosted on the Guiding Voice gives me an opportunity to leave behind a legacy, uh,
Wow.
and I appreciate that.
Yeah. Indeed. I always think the same thing. Like whatever the efforts that we are putting in, it's going to stay here even after our lifetime. So, which you reminded me, and thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate it, and appreciate your time and all the insights. I thoroughly enjoyed every bit of our conversation. Thank you once again, Tasso.
Thank you, Naveen.
So, folks, that was our conversation with Tasso Nikitakis. And before we move into the trivia section, here is a request to you. Please subscribe to us from wherever you have tuned in case if you haven't done already. In case if you are listening to this episode on Spotify or Apple, request you to follow if you are not already following us. And also feel free to leave a review and rating so that it will help us boost our reach. And if you have loved this episode and found the conversation useful, request you to share with at least 3 of your friends or colleagues who can benefit from the guiding voice. Thank you so much in advance. Now, let's hop into the trivia segment. And today's trivia is about the first billboard which was created to advertise the circus. Means the very first billboard that was put up was created to advertise the circus. Normally, when we drive by the billboards on our way to work or anywhere, have you ever wondered how they first came to be? Although we likely pass by several billboards on our morning commute, these giant advertisements were not always this popular. In the early 19th century, the closest thing cities had to billboards were the small promotional flyers local merchants would hang up for passers-by to see as they went through the town. And this changed when a man named Jared Bell began printing large advertisements, now known as billboards, to advertise traveling circus acts. A few years later, his idea took off, and the first ever billboard was leased for advertising purposes in 1867. Interesting thing, isn't it? And here comes a question to you all. If you were given a chance to put up your quote, put up your quotation or anecdote on a gigantic billboard anywhere and of any size in this world, what would it be and where would it be? Please feel free to leave your comments in case if you're watching it on YouTube, or else you can share your thoughts through social media or email me. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Friends, do not forget to share your topic recommendations and guest speaker suggestions through social media or email me at theguidingvoiceforyou@gmail.com. I'm your host, Navin Samala, just a fellow IT professional and a passionate learner on a mission to make the world a better place to live through the conversations that matter and conversations that add value to your life and to your career. Until next time, bye-bye. See you all in the next episode with another wonderful guest. Signing off for today.